Hey guys, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Nuns. Today we're studying Luke chapter 21. Let's get started.
Okay, as you're getting down to these final few chapters of the book of Luke, please understand all of this is pushing us to one major event. Now, what's that major event, John?
Jesus' death.
Jesus' death. Now, the gospel of Jesus is based on the fact that Jesus was born into this world. He had been prophesied about. There had been all sorts of people talking about the Messiah coming. And so Jesus was born. He lived a sinless life. He died on the
cross.
He was buried for
3 days.
And after 3 days, he
rose again.
And then the last thing this is, as chapter 21 is winding down, the disciples ask Jesus a question. They start looking ahead. And they're looking at the temple and all these kind of things. And Jesus just kind of says, hey, everything you're seeing one day will be completely gone. And so what Jesus is talking about, he's going to be talking about the end times. And what happens is these disciples look at him and they're very curious about this. They say, Lord, when will these things happen? What will be the sign of your coming? And so what you have whenever you start looking at this chapter is Jesus is looking at what's here and now, but he's also looking ahead. Now, I want you to see something. In just a second, John is going to tell us about the opening story here is the story of the widow's mite. Now, he's going to tell us about this. But before that, I want to kind of connect the dots between what's happened prior to this chapter and what's happening as the chapter opens. So chapter number 20 ends with Jesus talking about the scribes. And he says, beware of the scribes who desire to go around in long robes, love greetings in the marketplace, the best seats in the synagogue, the best places at the feast. And here's what he says. They devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. These will receive a greater condemnation. So the end of chapter number 20, Jesus is talking about these religious leaders who are devouring, taking from widows. And what he's talking about like exploiting them. Exploiting means they're taking advantage of these people. And what they're doing is they're showing their greed. So as he says this, now he jumps into a story about the widow and her mite, and Jesus is pointing to how somebody can trust in God. So where some are taking advantage of people, there are others who they're doing their very best to trust God with everything. Now, tell us about the widow's mite.
So the widow's mite. So there's a widower, and she only had 2 widow's mites. That's all her money she.
Were they called widow's mites before her, or were they just called mites, and now they're widow's mites because they're hers? They were mites, and now when we tell the story, now we call them widow's mites because that's now they're John's mites. All right, go.
Okay, so she gave her 2 mites and for the offering, and there are these rich people who just gave like some we don't know how much money, but a good bit of money, and God was pleased with the widow because she gave all she could give. But he was mad with the rich people because they didn't give all they could give. And so what this means is we need to pay all of our attention to God and not just a little bit of it. And also, so my mom went to Israel before, and she got a widow's mite, and it looks like this. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so we brought that back, and now it's on a necklace. But you can see it's a tiny little piece. It's a tiny little coin, and this little coin was the lady only had 2 of them. Matter of fact, they would be less than a penny. And so when it says that she gave that, she gave all of her little bit, where others gave a ton, but they had way more. And so Jesus was saying this lady actually gave more than somebody who gave a ton of money because she gave out of her very little bit. Now, here's what's also interesting about this story to me is that in the place in the temple where this lady was, there were certain places that were blocked off. So the first place was where you could go if you weren't Jewish. And people who aren't Jewish, like us, we're called Gentiles. So there was a spot we could go. Well, then there was a spot where ladies could go, Jewish ladies, and it was called the Court of the Women. And then past that was where Jewish men could go. Well, these offering boxes were inside the Court of the Women. And so inside the Court of the Women, there were 13 boxes. You know where it says they threw in their money? There were 13 boxes. And half of those boxes had a sign over them that said, for the sacrifices. And that helped to kind of pay the bills of the temple so that there could be sacrifices. The other half of the boxes said, for the poor. So she had 2 coins. Where do you think she put those 2 coins? If there's 2 kinds of offerings, what did she probably do with those 2 coins?
For the one in both of them?
She put one in both. Okay. And so think about this. This lady who didn't have much of anything, she gave to the work of God, but she also gave to who?
The poor.
The poor. And who was she?
The poor.
She was the poor. And so she is giving to take care of people who had even more than her. But she was careful to trust God. She gave, and she said, in essence, she's saying, I'm going to give what I have, and I'm going to trust God to give me what I need. Ooh, that was good. We give what we have and trust God to give us what we need. One of my favorite writers, his name is John Phillips. He wrote this, and I put this in the margin of my Bible next to this story. He said, the Lord is no man's debtor. We cannot help but wonder what that poor widow found on her doorstep when she arrived home. She made the Lord proud and happy because she left her daily needs in his hands. So what if this lady gave all she had and she went home thinking, well, how am I going to eat dinner? Here's the deal. The Bible tells us in the book of Proverbs, I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor their seed begging for bread. So does God take care of his people?
He does.
Okay, so what if this lady got home, and as she got home, she had given all of her money. What if when she got home, she found supper when she got home? And what if when she woke up, God gave her breakfast? Now some people say, well, that's crazy. Well, didn't the Israelites in the Old Testament wake up every day and manna had fallen on the ground? And isn't God the same God who can meet all of our needs? And the answer is yes. Now, later in this story, Jesus is teaching us that all of the things that the people are seeing would be destroyed. He's telling us don't get too attached to the things of this world because they won't last long. He's also saying when these disciples are asking, when will all these things be? Jesus uses the word will, W-I-L-L, like that will happen. He uses that 28 times in this chapter. So he's looking down through time, telling people what's going to happen. And do you know what he says? He says, do not be terrified. So even though we don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen, do we have to be afraid? No. And so what Jesus is doing, he's reminding these people that God is going to take care of him. I like what he says in verse 18. He says, not a hair of your head shall be lost. So God will not neglect a single thing that we have trusted to him. I like the fact that when Jesus talks to his people, he lets us look at what's going to happen in the end of the world with hope, not with fear, not with despair, because who's in charge of tomorrow? He is. I also like this, that he tells us so much about what's coming, not so that we'll be smart. The reason he gives us information about the future is to encourage present time faithfulness. He says for us to be able to watch. He says to be careful and don't be weighed down by carousing or drunkenness or the cares of this life. And what he's saying is that believers must not be stumbling over things that this world offers, but we ought to be ready for his return at any moment. Now, sometimes people will ask me this. They'll say, hey, Dusty, when do you think Jesus is coming back? Or when is the world going to end? Well, here's the deal. I do believe Jesus is coming back one day. And so when people ask me, here's what I'm careful to say, The Bible doesn't tell us when. As a matter of fact, it says none of us know. But here's what I can say. We're closer to Jesus coming back today than we were this time yesterday. And what if by this time tomorrow, he'll be here? Well, if that's the case, then I want to live the rest of today and all the way through tomorrow like I'm prepared to see him tomorrow afternoon. Let's be ready, okay? So let's keep reading. Tomorrow we'll be in chapter 22, and we're headed toward not just the cross, we're headed to the resurrection. All right, see you then. Bye.
Bye.